Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. Today, I talked to Jeff Webster from Hunter and Gather Foods. He is one half of the English dynamic duo, the first English guest on the podcast. He looks after my mum by providing her with seed oil-free mayonnaise, clean ingredient goods, putting it on supermarket shelves in the UK, and fighting a very similar fight to what we're fighting here, the fight for real food, the fight against seed oils. We learn about his inspiration, his story, how him and his partner overcame issues like celiac disease and chronic inflammation to find the truth in what it means to be a radically healthy human, and how they then built a business that gives people the goods that they need to thrive. We talk about the importance of Icelandic lamb liver and how to get good food into your homes and get out the toxic rubbish so you can be the healthiest version of yourself. It's a fun chat. Let's get into the show. Jeff, welcome to the show. First couple of things I want to get out here. Congratulations, you're the first British guest on the show, nearly 70 episodes deep, apart from myself, so it's good to chat to another English lad. And second, a thank you for giving my mum and dad, who are still in England, access to seed oil-free foods. Like the mayonnaises, just as I left the UK, it was just about when you were getting on supermarket shelves at home, and it was really cool to see. So I'm super excited to dive into today's conversation with you and hear the journey of Hunter and Gather and all about your personal health development through that as well. So welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Mate, delighted to be here. Number one, no pressure in terms of being the first Englishman. And number two, absolutely my pleasure in giving your parents some great product.
That's what it's all about, man, right? Tell me the story. Tell me the origin story of Hunter and Gather. And I actually know a little bit of insider information here. The name is actually kind of in the ancestral lineage of your families too, which seems like it's too good to be true. But tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I come from a line of gather goods, and Amy, my partner in life and in business, comes from a line of hunts. So put that together, it's a nice nod to our ancestral lineage, but also the ancestral kind of philosophy and primal ways of living that we absolutely love here. But yeah, the story of how the genesis catalyst of the business. Amy was born celiac, right? So she's always had a great insight into real food and cooking from scratch and understanding interactions of food with the body. I then met Amy when we was like 15 or 16 years old, so quite some time ago now. And I was quite a poorly kid, chronically ill, asthma, eczema, IBS, acne, all those good things that society likes to normalize. They're part of just growing up, right? We deal with them. And it wasn't until I was 21 years old, I was in my final year at university, and it was 2012, so over 12 years ago now. I went to see a Team GB physio. I was training for a marathon and I hurt my knee. And I went to him to see him, and his name's Phil Sadler. So shout out to Phil. I always shout him out. He put me on his bench and he said, "Jeff, what are you eating?" And I said, "Phil, I'm here to get my knee fixed." And he said, no, stick with me on this. There's this thing called inflammation, and your body has like systemic inflammation. And I'd never heard of it before. But he said, "Go home, check out this video." And it was Gary Taubes, the investigative journalist. And it was titled, "Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It." And for some reason, as a 21-year-old, I went home, checked out that video, and it literally changed my whole paradigm on life. And in terms of the food we put into our body, how the body can exist on different fuel substrates. And it just enlightened me. And from that moment, I was pretty much obsessed with the paleo diet, the low carb diet, kind of the more ancestral diets. And yeah, that was the switch that flicked in my life. That was the catalyst for me to go down this rabbit hole and become obsessed. Fast forward on 6 years or 5 or 6 years, I'd kind of explored graduate entry medicine, nutritional therapy, a whole host of different kind of career paths on how I can work within this space. Health coaching wasn't really a thing back then, particularly here in the UK. And Amy was kind of had a career within the pet food industry that had just started, and she'd got insight into how like kind of big food and these massive manufacturers were putting ingredients into pet food, and it wasn't good. And obviously my mind was being open to how the big food industry kind of was put in profit, well, not kind of, was put in profit before people's health. And look, this was back in 2015, 2016, and times have got worse since then. But yeah, we was essentially, how can we help as many people as possible? How can we be that typical millennial that wants to change the world? We essentially said, hey, there's nothing on the shelves in supermarkets available online that can help people that want to adopt this way of living. So with a massive dose of naivety, ignorance, and determination, we set about producing some products, and Hunter and Gather was born in 2017.
That's incredible, mate. Yeah, and that's one of the things you realize. And I think in a way you've built a business around wanting to provide this for people, but also to solve the problem that you were probably experiencing as you adopt this lifestyle, which is you can't buy anything that isn't contaminated with vegetable or seed oils, that isn't just laden with processed sugars and all of these weird, funky ingredients. It's the same story here in America. Almost 99% of stuff on the supermarket shelves is rubbish. And then you see some brands that break through. And you guys are really the first brand to do it in the UK, and certainly the leading brand. And it's really cool. But you said something that parallels here as well. It seems like profits supersede the need for putting healthy food on the shelves. And it's just profit at all costs. And that means hyper palatable, hyper processed foods, seed oil laden goods. How much resistance have you ran into trying to get this on actual supermarket shelves? Because I know you do a lot of sales through the website and things like that, but what's it been like to actually get inside the system, get it in people's hands, get it on shelves? And what's it been like to take a stand really against the way it's done worldwide now? Not just in America, in the UK it's the same, right? Everything is vegetable oil and seed oils. What's it been like to tackle that beast?
Yeah, we've had to maintain some strong sticking power. We're now 6.5 years deep, and it's only now that retailers are really starting to understand what we're about, and to understand that there's a market and consumer appetite for products that are free from seed oils, or products that contain organs, for instance, or animal-based products. I'm not sure if you know, but in the UK, and probably the same as the US, there was a huge growth between probably 2018 to 2022 of plant-based crap, essentially. Loads of venture capitalists, money backed, private equity, etc. And so many people have lost so much money through that. But during that time, we almost felt like we were almost ostracized by retailers, saying, what do you mean it contains animal-based products, or it's got eggs in the mayonnaise? It doesn't matter that it's British free-range eggs and the best sauce we can get. It contains eggs, so it's not going to be on the fixture in our retailer. But only in the last 12 months have really started to see that shift. So yeah, in short, it's been bloody tough work.
Yeah, we see that a lot, and we kind of rail against it because you have to, which is this push towards a plant-based future. And I feel like it is a little bit of a trend, and maybe what's happening is a testament to your staying power and staying committed to your values and standing for what you believe in. It also might be the fact that we see this a lot, like people go vegan when it was super trendy, and a lot of the documentaries were coming out, the Game Changers, What the Health, Cowspiracy, all of these things. They go vegan, maybe they feel good for a few months or maybe a year, and then the wheels start to fall off. And the pipeline, actually, when people go vegan, I'm almost happy, because the pipeline of them coming back to something like a paleo, ancestral, animal-based way of eating, I feel, is in the near future, because they can't ignore the language of the body, and the physiology is outweighed by the philosophy is outweighed by the physiology. Eventually, you're going to pay the price for those nutrient deficient diets. So I'm glad that now it's opening up, and there is a trend of the awareness of things like vegetable oil and seed oil. How do you find the general attitude is towards food in the UK? As a consumer, you're obviously putting high quality products on the shelf, and that raises the price and things like that. I've heard you say before, and I really like this frame, don't ask why healthy food is so expensive, but more so probably ask why normal food is so cheap.
Yeah, the kickback particularly from the buyers that work within big retailers, so like the likes of Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, etc. here in the UK, they're the ones that have a high degree of conservatism when it comes to giving you a chance. Ultimately, they've got a certain degree of commercial lens that they place on space within their shelves. So if they put something on a shelf that doesn't sell, ultimately their superiors within their organization, they're going to be responsible for that. So that's where a lot of pushback comes. So we've had to create this huge body of evidence via our own website, via Amazon, via small independent retailers to say, hey guys, look at these numbers, look at the demand, this is where we're at. With consumers, I think the beauty of adopting an animal-based diet or a diet that's free from seed oils, it only gets better the further you go along, which is contrary to a plant-based diet. At first you have the honeymoon period and then the wheels start to fall off. Well, the other way around when it comes to the philosophy that we advocate. So yeah, the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah.
Essentially. So when people adopt this way of living, things only get better, typically.
I see that as well. You very rarely see the animal-based eater or the paleo eater or whatever moniker they attach to go to something like a plant-based, but you see it happening quite a lot the other way. And I think that's again testament to understanding who we are, where we came from as a species, and what we really need to thrive. What is happening in the landscape of UK health in terms of the general trends, increasing things like chronic diseases and diabetes? I know it's getting worse. I'm confident of that. I'm not sure that you are following in the footsteps of America very closely, but I think I remember when England was a part of the EU, that they were the fattest country in the EU. Chronic disease seems to be on the rise. And what do you think is going on? What's driving a lot of this, malnourishment and ill health?
It's pretty wild, to be fair. I think there's a stat that 40% of primary school children, which is 11 years old, you leave primary school, are overweight or obese.
Damn.
Like 40%. It's wild. What's driving it? I think the drive towards ultra processed foods, that seems to be a in vogue kind of phrase now in the UK, ultra processed foods. And you hear like the commentators and particular nutritionists, and it's doing the rounds in the media. It's like someone stumbled upon something new. I mean, look, it used to be called junk food. It used to be called like crap, but now it's UPF, it's ultra processed foods. So, and then you got supermarkets here in the UK that are trying to adopt these new like guidelines to stop promotion of these foods in certain promotional aspects. That sort of thing is just scratching the surface. I think there's just an abundance of hyper palatable ultra processed foods that coupled with the use of social media, people just self-medicating, that people are so detached from what it means to be human. They're just going by their day, just in their phones, not outdoors. I mean, the UK hasn't got the greatest of climates or weather system, for instance. It's a complex question, but ultimately people are just, it's hard to answer.
What does it mean to you to just be human? Like you said, people are kind of wrapped up in just running around, living life on autopilot, life by default, less by design. What does it mean to you to try and be more human? You mentioned a couple of things like light and getting outdoors. What else? Like what really grounds you in the hunter-gatherer version of Matt?
A whole host of things. As you know, like morning sunlight, eating nutrient-dense foods, grounding, walking, being outdoors as much as possible, connecting with people in real life. A whole host of things that obviously we all advocate and we all know about within this system or within this philosophy. But the UK has this conservative mindset in terms of if you do those sort of things, that's seen as like really quirky, it's seen as really bizarre. Why would you be doing that? You don't want to be the nail that's sticking out. So I think that doesn't do the UK and the UK population any justice.
Yeah, I definitely seen that. And, the term now is the tall poppy syndrome in like the UK, in Australia. They want to chop the tall poppy down, right, and keep everybody on a level playing field. It seems that the only people in our culture that we like to prop up were the celebrities or the footballers, and everybody else should just be very normal. And what's normal in the UK is like going to the pub on a Friday and Saturday night and having a few pints with your mates. And God forbid you want to choose something more aligned, something better. You know what? I don't want to just go to the pub and watch the football and eat peanuts that are, cooked in seed oils and drink a few pints and feel like crap the next day. Maybe I want to get to bed on time. Maybe I want to get up and watch the sunrise. Maybe I want to exercise. And there's a lot of banter, right? There's a lot of pullback from your friends. And I think that's everywhere. But in particular, England's quite a small little island floating there. It's very densely populated and it's gray. Like you mentioned, the disposition of the weather is kind of gray. And I feel like it clouds our, perspective sometimes, whereas America just feels big and expansive. And most of the time, or at least some of the time, there's a celebration of people that go their own way and make something of themselves, which seems a little bit more vibrant and alive. But if you're going to change that landscape, if you're going to change those thoughts, you have to just take a stand for something, right? You have to create something. And I think you could tell me more on the numbers here, but you did something like 5 million in sales over the last year, and you're trying to grow to 10. So there is a demand for it, right? There is growth. What kind of people do you think are really latching onto this message? Is it a specific demographic of a person? Like, what are they into? How have they become aware of this? Who are you really targeting? And obviously, I hope that's everybody in the future, but who's really latched onto Hunter and Gather?
Yeah, so just on the numbers, it's been the growth numbers are never as wild as the US, obviously, because we've got six times, like you got 6 times more population in the US, and I think something like 10 times more US spend on food and drink than we do in the UK. But for perspective, the business done a revenue of £6.5 million last year, and we're on track to do like in excess of 11 million this year, which is fantastic, and it shows there's a huge appetite from a particular section of society that wants this. But yeah, who's latching onto it? We always get asked by like marketing agencies and branding experts, like, who is your consumer? It's like, well, our consumer can range from someone in their teenage years who stumbled across Eddie Abu on TikTok, for instance, who's talking about get rid of the crap, to someone in their 70s who's been told they need a hip replacement and has started to understand about inflammation and arthritis. So essentially, it's an individual that's realized that the food system or the wider system is failing them, and they're seeking answers. And they're kind of waking up to how these conflicted interests are keeping them sick, essentially. So yeah, we have some wonderful interactions with a whole host of different people from different walks of life. But it's challenging to actually get through to customers or to people in the UK, because back to the earlier question you asked, people are obsessed about fiber. So fiber is a thing that all nutritionists talk about on TV. You must have your fiber. And you got Tim Spector, who's fairly popular here in the UK at the moment with the Zoe app. And it's all about fiber, and it's all about plant-based foods. And to sit down with someone and say, well, it might not be all that it's cracked up to be, is quite a difficult conversation to have when a platform is given to individuals such as that. And they sound very convincing and very compelling. Or it's all about calories still. It's wild that the conversation revolves around calories and eat less and move more. And that's where we're here in the UK. That's kind of the go-to kind of advice that we still see.
Well, it's alive and well here too. And I think it's, there's a lot of credentialism in just the modern Western world in general, which is when the doctor gets the platform and the doctor espouses whatever ideology it is, people are much more likely to listen to it. And Tim Spector's a good example, right? He's super famous, been on Diary of a CEO talking about the importance of plant-based. And because he's got the credentials, people obviously think he's right. Doctors are essentially gods in our culture, despite the fact that most doctors don't learn anything about nutrition during the medical, education. Now you've got somebody on our side, like Dr. Paul Saladino, who's also a doctor, who's going completely the opposite direction. And it gives some credibility to the message, because people they need an expert to tell them what to do, because they're probably so disconnected from being the human. Like, you and I have both experienced probably eating the way we were told to eat and what we should do based on the expert's advice, and it failed me. It sounds like it wasn't working for you very well, and now you're kind of breaking all the rules, and you're healthier for it, and you're doing better for it, and you're getting people these products. And if they're getting seed oil-free products, they're almost certainly eliminating the processed sugars and the ultra-processed foods, and they're probably going gluten-free, and they're probably doing less fiber from the fibrous foods, and they're probably eating more protein, and They're doing more red meat. So they're breaking all the rules. And I'm sure you see it in the DMs or in the emails every day that this is helping them massively. Put things into remission. Eczema is gone. Psoriasis is gone. Celiac disease isn't bothering them anymore. You know, the knee from running the marathon is feeling great. So it's just interesting. I think, I hope that conversations like this help people understand that ultimately they are the expert of understanding their own body if they really tune into it and tap into it. But if we just outsource all of our thinking to these talking heads or the people that are on the documentaries, we're going to struggle, because it doesn't seem like they have our best interest at heart. Not to get too conspiratorial, but it seems like it's just all about profits. And that's a really trendy, profitable movement at this point. And we need more people telling that story and just trying to put the power back in the hands of the consumers to say, hey, try it and see what happens for you.
But that's where the problem is, because that's a threat to the system. That's a threat to the status quo. And yeah, again, without sounding too conspiratorial, I don't think people are sitting around a round table and saying, hey, if we do this, that means it's good for them, etc. But the current system is set up where all the stakeholders and shareholders know exactly what their forecasts are saying, their projections. Their business is built around the status quo. So anyone that's questioning that is, even down when it's, you know, if you question calories, for instance, or if you question fiber being the best thing, or red meat is good for you, but the WHO says that it isn't bad for you and it's actually a carcinogen. All these things are set up, and if you start to question that, you're almost ostracized and made to look a quack.
Yes.
So particularly in the UK, again, I don't know what it's like in the US, but I think with a population 6 times more, you're going to get 6 times more people that are going to get behind a cause, in simple terms, and will support. Whereas over here, it's a bit like, yeah, we're here, guys, and this is what we're about. But yeah, that threat to the system is certainly a real thing.
Yeah. I think you still have huge swaths of people that are going to listen to the mainstream narrative. But the spirit of Americans is also, there's like this inbuilt rebel in them, like America exists on that foundation. So some of them get their spidey senses tingling, like, oh, they say do this, I'm going to think like, what's the opposite here? And I'm going to try that. And that this caters to those people. And it just so happens that being a rebel in the health sphere today means breaking all the rules and getting healthier for it. And again, that might not help a system so much that's built on, the sick care system versus the health care system. It's incentives. If you understand the incentives, you'll understand the outcomes. And in America in particular, where there's no free healthcare, for example, you pay for it and all of that stuff. It seems that the pharmaceutical industry is a huge industry, billions of dollars a year. And it feels like, with the way they allow foods to be on our supermarket shelves and the way that they don't talk about this stuff. And not only do they make you sound like a quack, but they'll censor information. They'll take it down from social media platforms. Our videographer, Cade, put a video about raw milk the other day, and it was taken down immediately. And we see this over and over again. So it's not just like they're character assassinating you by saying, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about. They're literally trying to control the information. And they can operate under the guise, I think, of, well, we're doing this to keep people healthy. But it does raise questions about, well, is it that if we know and we're seeing hundreds of people on this grassroots movement level, thousands of people, millions of people that are improving their health by breaking all the rules, then maybe it's not about health. Maybe it's about profits. Maybe it's about fueling the sick care system. And maybe that's a really great business model for them. And what our great business model is trying to get people healthy again, trying to get them investing in a seed oil-free mayonnaise or buying some, organ supplements or something like that. So the healthy rebellion is what we're fighting for, and I think that's a worthy cause.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Talk to me about organs. Organs is a weird one, right? Because I think seed oil-free mayonnaise people can get behind, but as soon as you start talking about organs to anybody, they get a little bit turned off. Now, you guys do some organs, but you use ancient breed of Icelandic lamb. That sounds super cool. Tell me about the importance of that for you. Like, why the Icelandic lamb?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously organs are one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. But many people, particularly within our modern culture, are so squeamish when it comes to consuming organs. So for us, it was like, how can we actually put this into a format that is palatable, it's convenient, it's easy for obviously consumers to adopt. Obviously, what the guys over at Heart and Soul do is fantastic. We're doing a similar thing here in the UK. And for us, it was about how can we source the organs from the most purest of places. And for us, it was the Icelandic sheep. They literally live a wild roaming kind of the wildest of diets, the wildest of lifestyles possible. So they're kind of let out with the mums. They go out into the mountains. They live wild for about a year, and then are brought down in October time on horseback by like the local villages. So it's a fantastic kind of prestigious event.
Mm-hmm. It's called Retir?
Yeah, Retir, the Retir, yeah.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by Iceland.
Went over there Amy and I went over there in October to actually help with that process. So it's quite a ritual, and it's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, and another nod to the way it's always been done. You know, these Icelandic lamb roaming the mountains, rugged. Iceland itself is just a crazy place. It's like volcanic and you know, mysterious, and the people from there are just like, I love them, the gangsters. And you're doing that on horseback. It's like, yeah, this is what it's all about. It's the remembering, right? And getting closer to our food and honoring these ancestral lineages and the wisdom that has been lost. Talk to me about the landscape of like UK agriculture as a whole. Something we talk about a lot here, and something that's kind of like been memed into existence through people that have experienced what the food is like here, and then say going on vacation to Europe and eating similar foods that would wreck them here. It doesn't wreck them quite as much there. And there's some arguments to be made that America's really leading the way in the use of herbicides, pesticides, rodenticides, etc. And they're spraying thousands of pounds of glyphosate. Maybe there's some tighter regulations on some of that stuff in the EU. But I remember growing up in England. I remember like the green, lush rolling hills. I remember seeing cows out on pasture. Has it been, because obviously you source very good ingredients, like you said, free-range egg yolks for the mayonnaise and grass-fed beef, and I want to talk about the collagen and all of that stuff. How much as the farming system or the agriculture system, like, is it more left in its natural state? Is it naturally regenerative? How much of the caged animal feeding operation and the factory farm is taken over in the UK too? Do you have a read on that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think like ruminants, beef, so cattle, lamb, deer, for instance, in the UK is like really good. Like we live in a climate where it's conducive to have animals out on pasture. But when you get down to like chicken farming, pork farming, it's still not very desirable. But I think you guys in the US, it's on steroids in terms of how concentrated those operations are. I think the EU and the UK, for instance, we don't inject cattle with hormones, and there's no like routine antibiotics, even in like the most kind of basic of the basic beef here in the UK and in the EU. So our restrictions are far tighter. And I think when the use of like pesticides, herbicides, etc., and glyphosate is a lot less here in the EU and UK. So I think there are some key differences. Like I said, you guys lead the way in terms of innovation, quote unquote, when it comes to all these different chemicals. And yeah, there was a time when I was like, you must consume grass-fed, grass-finished beef and nothing else. But that almost becomes out of the realms of possibility, and then it begs the questions in like consumers' mind. Well, can I not have the 20% fat mince that's in the supermarket? That's all I can afford. It's like, no, absolutely have that. So I've spent quite a lot of time personally exploring things like abattoirs here in the UK. And back in January, I went to the UK's biggest independent abattoir, who exclusively supplied the beef to one of the UK supermarkets. Confidentially, I can't say who it is, but I was blown away by the operation and how ethical it was, how streamlined it was, how empathetic it was to the cattle. So, like for instance, they played classical music within the holding pen where the beef were, where the cows were. There was a particular like line of sight and how the cattle move through from the holding pen to the kill box, for instance. Even down to how the ground was and how it was, everything was done to keep the stress low in the animal. So I think, yeah, we've got a fantastic system here in the UK, and I think that needs to be championed more. Because I think people hear about the horror stories.
Yeah.
You know, you see the likes of the vegan propaganda movies, and they'll always pick out the extreme example and say, look, this is how it is. And it's like, no, guys, it's not how it is. But we've seen a lot of the kind of the plant-based brands here in the UK that have got a huge amount of funding have been pushing those extreme messages. So then the lay consumer thinks that's what it's like. So I think one of my life missions beyond hunter and gather is going to be championing animal-based agriculture and the wonderful things that farmers do, and how great, how nutrient dense foods are for people.
It's super important, man. And I liked your point as well about we obviously push as much as possible. Support the farmers that are doing it right. Regenerative agriculture is really important because the health of our soils is the health of our future, and farmers hold our life essentially in their hands, because if the food runs out, it's not going to end well. And at the same time, you have to get, it's give and take, because you can't be so health elitist that it's only grass-fed and finished when the economy and the climate for people right now, monetary wise, is really challenging. And how do you square that circle of like, hey, just eat beef, even if it's coming from a feedlot, because it's still really nutrient dense. It isn't as good for the animals. It isn't as good for the soils of the planets. We are using a lot of synthetic inputs there. And I think more conversations like this, and ultimately over time, supply creates demand, right? Or demand creates supply, rather, that if we do continue to vote with our dollar in the right places, that these systems will change. But I'm very happy to hear that you actually went to one of these places and was pleasantly surprised, because you're right. The emotive footage that is used to show what goes on in these feedlot operations is always, it's heartbreaking. I feel the heartbreak when I watch it. I don't want to support those systems. I feel guilty. I see why people want to remove themselves from that system entirely. But the cherry picking, and it's not all like that, right? And if you can take some control back of your own food and how you choose to support it, whether that's farmers markets, going directly to the consumer, or just knowing that you're putting your money in the right place, the people that's doing it right, that life supports life and life requires death, and it's a kind of an uncomfortable truth of our life. But if we can do it in the right way, in the ethical way as much as possible, so we can have our highest level of health, so we can go about enacting change in the world, then that's what it's all about. So very pleasantly surprised to hear that, and going to one of the bigger ones in the UK, because I have a feeling that if you went to one of the biggest beef suppliers in the US, I don't think they're playing classical music to the cows and really thinking about keeping stress levels low. My intuition tells me that's probably not what's happening. It seems like it's just a big machine, which is why it is really important to think about where you're getting that stuff from. Please continue, yeah.
But yeah, no, to add to that, here in the UK, if you look at the buying habits of consumers, they choose to buy chicken and pork, which doesn't have a great... The standard chicken and pork isn't great, but there's been so much propaganda that red meat and beef is bad for us, that the consumer's habits, the consumer appetite is just not totally gone away. But when you say to someone, "Hey, I'm having like beef for lunch," like in the office here at Hunter and Gather, everyone has beef, but they'll join the company and they'll be like, "But isn't that red meat bad for you?" It's like, no, guys, and here's why. Yeah, that's what I want to add.
Yeah. I mean, worldwide, what's really interesting is if you look at health trends, they've been getting worse since the 30s, but they really kind of exponentially exploded in terms of ill health outcomes, diabetes, chronic disease, everything hockey sticks from around the 50s and 60s, and it's not really slowing down at all. It's interesting when you look at worldwide beef consumption over that time, because it's actually coming down, and animal fat consumption is coming down, but what is on the rise is chicken and pork consumption. It's the same thing here too. And I think, that's obviously a smaller animal, and if they build these systems, it can be more profitable. But really, to pin the tail of blame on the beef and the red meat, it doesn't really make sense, because we're actually eating less red meat than we have in the past, but we're eating significantly more chicken and pork. And these animals, their facilities are terrible. And I get it. I have a little homestead. I raise chickens. It is not cost effective to do chickens, regeneratively raised, corn and soy-free feed, and out foraging on bugs. And if you actually buy one of those, like truly free-range chicken here in the US, you're probably looking at $25-$30 a bird, whereas you can go to the store and at the right time and place, you could probably get a bird for $7 or $8 for a whole chicken. So it's a broken food system. It's broken incentives. And again, this fear mongering around saturated fat and cholesterol has really forced the consumer to consume less beef, and the health outcomes aren't matching that. In the plant-based future of the world, that's going to save us. Well, when? because already about 70% of our daily calories are coming from plant-based foods. Already we've replaced the bulk of the butter and the tallow and all of those things for margarines and seed oils. So in theory, if this is going to save us, it should have been working already. Yet in reality, we're getting sicker, we're getting fatter, our kids are getting fatter, we're having more diseases and developmental delays. So it quite clearly isn't working as far as I can see it. And I think getting more beef back on the plate is very, very important. And I'm the same. I eat beef every single day, sometimes twice a day. And people just think at any moment you're going to keel over from clogged arteries or your bum hole is going to fall out because of colon cancer. Meanwhile, my health just keeps improving. So it's like the upside down world sometimes.
Oh yes, the clown world. It's almost, if it wasn't so bad, it would be funny, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tragically comedic at times. When we're talking about beef, talk to me about collagen. Your first products on supermarket shelves was the seed oil-free mayonnaise, right? But collagen has been a big focus of yours recently. How do you see the importance of getting extra collagen in the diet, and what's been the thought process there of really thinking about what makes a good quality collagen product when we know there's a lot of crappy collagen products on the market?
Yeah, again, so there's an absence of having like gelatinous meats and things like oxtail and ox tongue used to be on the menu here in the UK, but everyone's gone away from that. Now it's super lean chicken or super lean mince, but it's typically chicken and pork. And there's just no collagen that's consumed in a diet now, or bone broths or anything like that. It's all kind of just gone away with the ultra processed foods that are coming. So for us, if you seeing how people can supplement or consume collagen, it seems to have a huge impact on people's lives. I mean, they report their skin, hair, nails, joints all improve, which is pretty wild when you almost think, geez, having 10 grams or 20 grams of collagen per day has this impact, but it really does. And I think it just goes to show how deficient people are in protein and these more specific amino acids. But yeah, for us, sourcing from cattle from the EU on pastures and good regulation is important. We know many collagen suppliers and producers in the world that you can't even trace back to like what region the collagen comes from. And that could be China, it could be South America, it could be anywhere. So yeah, collagen isn't collagen in that regard. And we're always like super specific. They come from France or Germany here in the EU, even though we're not in the EU anymore. But yeah, it's a complex, muddy world for sure.
I've heard you talk in the past as well about other kind of layers of deception, if you will, around the way things can be labeled and not full transparency. And one of the things that you were very passionate about is you want to be as transparent and honest as possible about the sourcing and where the food comes from. What are some of the things you've learned now in the manufacturing process, for example, of a seed oil-free mayonnaise and getting that on shelves? Like, what are some of the ways that manufacturers can lie? We see it in the US here. Like, you'll go down the supermarket now and there's a dozen avocado oil or olive oil based mayos, and they put it right on the front, and the average consumer will be like, oh great. And then if you actually turn it over, there is like olive oil in the mayo, but it's the 15th ingredient and it's like 1% of the total product, but they can market it as an olive oil mayo. Is it a similar kind of game there, or like what can get through and still be labeled as natural or organic and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's various levels of deception, if you want to call it deception, that go on. So we have a particular competitor that's trying to have space on supermarket shelves, and they'll say mayonnaise made with extra virgin olive oil. So to a lay consumer, fantastic, it's made with olive oil. You turn it around, it's made with 5% olive oil, and that's a threshold here in the UK that if you want to call out an ingredient on the front, it needs to have that amount of product within it. So even on our social media channels a few weeks back, we had people tagging this other brand saying, yeah, these guys do an olive oil mayonnaise. It's like, no, it's not. And it's, to you and I, it's so obvious. And to someone that's accustomed to looking at ingredients, it's so obvious. But it's quite humbling when you realize the mainstream consumer who is actually interested in health doesn't know these things. Then you've got to the other end of the spectrum where you can actually get away with not disclosing certain additives if it's 1% or less within the product. So things like maltodextrin or magnesium stearate or flow agents or certain binders or certain processing aids. It's actually within our food guidelines that you can actually utilize these things and not have to declare it on the back of pack. So when we first started to create the mayonnaise, we spoke to a contract manufacturer and they was like, yep, we use powdered eggs. It typically comes from Netherlands, but can be sourced from anywhere in the EU. Like, we don't know the origin of it. And we was like, guys, that's not good enough. Like, and we looked at the specification. It was 97% egg yolk powder. It was something else. And then undeclared flow agents. We was like, no, this is not acceptable. We want to use liquid egg that comes from one farm in the southwest of England. And they was like, but that means we've got to change our like processes and health and safety documentation, et cetera, to be able to handle this product. It was like, that's what we need to do. But yeah, essentially, so many products, even down to mayonnaise, can have powdered eggs. You don't need to declare that it's a powdered egg. It just says eggs, and then it's reconstituted with water. It's got flow agents, etc. So again, yeah, it's a muddy world. So you can be making the most intentional decision, but again, the food system is set up to have kind of muddy water.
Yeah, for sure. You gotta be really careful. And I think hopefully people listening to this and people that latch onto your brand are really doing it because they believe in your values and your ethics, that you're not willing to compromise, because otherwise everybody's getting greenwashed. That's the term that's used a lot here. They'll just use trendy buzzwords and they'll say things like, organic and natural and grass fed. And there's issues here in the US where you can say a product of beef is from the US, and that just could mean that it was packaged in the US. And it could be like 5 different cows from 5 different countries, all ground up in the same pound of ground beef. And it's like, oh, a grass-fed product of the US beef. And you have no idea what you're getting. So there's a lot of that going on. It's really confusing, and I remember, speaking to my mom and dad early on in this, and they got conned in that way, just kind of getting greenwashed because they were picking up these other items that they was like, well, this is better, right? And I was like, just turn it over and read the ingredients list. So you do have to become a little bit of a detective. And it's really reassuring for people, I think, to find companies that they can actually believe in, that they know are doing what is right, because for every company like a Heart and Soil, for every company like a Hunter and Gather, there's going to be a dozen knockoffs that are cutting corners, reducing costs, and using the easier, production lines and whatnot to try and turn a profit and just, jump on the back of what is trendy. So I think it's really a testament to your dedication, and that's ultimately what's going to make you, hopefully a household name in the long run. What is the big vision for Hunter Gatherer? Like, how big do you want this thing to get? How much do you want to disrupt the food system in the UK? What's like the big audacious goal? Like, where do you see this going over the next 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, the big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Mm-hmm. It's to change what the status quo is within several categories within supermarkets. So it's to demonstrate that an ancestrally inspired lifestyle is the default human state. And we can do that through changing so many different categories within supermarkets. And look, that's probably way beyond what Amy and I as individuals can do. So we see ourselves as like the guardians for this mission. And we've got a team of 20 people here now who are all equally as passionate for this. And, the team's growing, etc. But why can't we move into several different categories within the supermarket and demonstrate that these products are wanted? It's so difficult to say like what is the goal and objective, because that puts almost a glass ceiling on what is possible. So it's kind of like let destiny run its course.
Let a swath of healthy people kind of tell the story as well. Like, I would love to see a world where eating organs as your multivitamin is as normal as picking up the multivitamin on the shelf, the synthetic one that you piss most of it out and it's just a waste of money. Like, what if that was so normal? What if like grass-fed and finished beef became the norm again because there was such a demand for it from the consumers? What if like you said, our default state is actually to be healthy and to be thriving and to be a relatively lowish body fat and not be in pain in our bodies and not have this moniker of like, oh, it's all downhill after 30 or 40 and everybody's dealing with a few chronic diseases and it's been completely normalized. Like, what if the norm was it's common, but it's not normal actually. And what if we can reverse that? And the only way we're going to do it, like you said, is getting people the products in the hand so they can empower themselves and hopefully make other people in the family and the communities passionate about this and change the tides. Speaking about inspiration and passion, I'm curious who you derive that from. Like, who are some of your health heroes? Who have been some of your kind of North Star guiding lights along the way? Who's really inspired you to continue playing this and moving it forward?
Yeah, I think Gary Taubes was the first one when I come across the video and read his books, Why We Get Fat and Good Calories, Bad Calories, and really started to peel back the layers. So yeah, Gary's been an interesting one, and I know certain people view him as quite controversial and he's quite dogmatic in his kind of theories. Mark Sisson, obviously, listen to the Sisson. He's like the OG in the space.
Legend.
Absolute legend. Paul Saladino is awesome. So yeah, you can listen to too many people as well, I think, sometimes. You can get quite complicated, but I think listening to yourself, listening to your own intuition as well, and being connected to your own human state is important. So yeah, I think those 3 or 4 people have been key. Peter Attia in the early days, I remember reading his, it was called the Eaton Academy, but I think he's took an interesting path the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, he's not super big on the old red meat cholesterol life. I think he advocates for it would be cool to put statins in the water supply kind of philosophy, which is kind of crazy to me. But
yeah, so I think my values have parted ways with his values, but I'm sure he won't lose any sleep over that.
Right. And the UK's got a rising star right now in the social media sphere. You mentioned him briefly, Eddie Abu. What's your take on Eddie?
Yeah, Eddie's a disruptive guy, man. I mean, I think I followed him on Instagram when he had like 30,000 followers, and I think he's got like 3 or 4 million now.
Yeah, he's millions now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize, because I'm not a huge user of social media myself, but the guys in the office kept being like, "Hey, look, Eddie's on another video." So has he transcended across to your side of the pond as well? Is he?
Eddie is in all the algorithms now, man. He's on the For You page and he's constantly blowing up, and I just love it. I love his energy, and his, like, obviously he swears a bit too much for a few people's liking. Everything this is fucking bullshit, guys. And he's a big personality. He's a big guy. He's an ex-bodybuilder, obviously a polarizing figure, but he is very aligned with this message. He's very much pushing an ancestral lens of eating and living, and raw milk and red meat and eating eggs and all of that stuff. So I love his message, and we need disruptors in the space, right? We need these people. That's inspiring to me that somebody like Eddie can go from relatively unknown to millions of followers seemingly overnight, because people are picking up his message, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, his traction's been wild, and I think it's super useful that you've got people like that are shouting from the rooftops and being disruptive, and then obviously you've got brands such as us that are helping give consumers a choice, and they can actually spend their pounds or dollars wisely. But yeah, Eddie, if you listen to this, man, respond to our emails. Keen to work with you.
Get Eddie some of that mayo. He'll be great for business. That's awesome.
What I love about you guys in the US is everyone seems to work together, and there's like cross-pollination between brands and content creators and all sorts. Like in the UK, it doesn't seem to happen as much. Everyone kind of works in their silos, which is it can be difficult. I think we can be so much stronger if we all work together and like cross collaborate, etc. But
I think so too, man. I think like that's why we want to have conversation with brands like yourself, and it's really collaboration beats competition. We're actually fighting. We're not fighting each other. We're fighting a broken food system. And if we're going to change that, we need as many coherent voices on this, even if they're doing very similar things, even if they're technically in another lens a competitor. Well, what if we remove that mindset and just focus on actually when we win, you win. When you win, we win. When this message wins, we all win. And I think that's it's probably another nod to the English mindset again, of just kind of like it's inherently a little bit more competitive, and if you win that we lose kind of philosophy. And I don't see it that way. Like you said, the importance of an abundance mindset of like, we can all win in this game, and we need to all win, and we need to give voices to the farmers, and we need to give voices to other brands. And if we have a big platform, why don't we lift other people up? And the rising tide will lift all boats, and we need that, because otherwise this monster, this 3-headed hydra where we cut one head off and it just comes back with a different one, is going to keep growing and growing and growing. And as that grows, we're going to get sicker and sicker and sicker. So again, it's the healthy rebellion. This is what we need to do.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think the default state in the UK is that scarce mindset. It's like, if you win, I lose. And it's a real shame. It's a real shame.
Yeah. What's it? Last question from me, because we've touched a little bit on the business side of things, and it's incredible to see your growth and the fact that you've got 20 people pushing this message forward now, and hopefully just going to go from strength to strength. Amy couldn't join us today. Your better half, your business partner. What's it like being in business? Obviously you're in partnership and you're together, but what's it like being in business with your wife? What's it been like to build that together as a couple that have overcome their own health challenges and now are getting to do this crazy thing in the business world too?
Yeah, it's an absolute roller coaster, and we're very much involved with like the business. Like, we're in the business, we work in the business, and like, it's hard. We've both got roles. Like, Amy's CEO, I'm COO, and we have various people reporting into us. So to maintain that healthy balance and a relationship that's positive and warm and giving, etc., and to maintain our own health status. And it can be difficult. It's challenging. Like, right now, we're raising some investment right now. And before this call, I was reading through some shareholders agreements. Like, that's the reality of trying to push forward this sort of business. Mate, the successes and the wins are great. You celebrate them together. When your head hits the pillow at night time, you know what each other's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You can like rest with comfort that tomorrow you're going to be on the same page. But when, I think the art of it is when one of you are down, like, the other one steps in and helps. And we've always struck a good balance there. But it's not without its costs.
Yeah. It's
not without its costs, for sure. But we won't have it any other way. It is great. We're on this mission together, and long may it continue.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm very inspired by what you guys are doing, and it's really cool. I'm still an English boy at heart, and to see that there are brands that are disrupting. And again, to thank you for looking after my family that's still at home, that has all of your products. Actually, my mum was an early investor in the company. She's one of the early investors when you were crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, whatever you call that. And she just absolutely adores you guys. So she'll be happy. Shout out to me, mum. And thank you, man. Thank you for everything you do. I want to give you the mic to say any closing thoughts and let people know where they can go and follow, because I really like your website and your blog too. It seems like you're very education focused. There's some really good articles on there about seed oils and the history and things like that. So point people in the right direction. Where can they go to keep up with you guys?
Yeah, head over to hunterandgatherfoods.com. Great shout out there for the seed oils article. We put a lot of work into that. Tim Rees, one of our researchers, spent months trawling through all the research literature around seed oils. I think it's over 10,000 words. So come over to the website, dig into that, and understand the origins of seed oils and why you should do all you can to avoid them.
Yeah, love it. It's really good, man. Thank you for everything you do. It was a pleasure. I look forward to seeing what you guys continue to do and how you continue to grow. And let's do it together.
Wicked. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Fam, we'll see you next week. Peace out. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.